People really need to upskill and reskill before digitalization starts penetrating quickly, or otherwise the challenge will be very serious for them. So my name is Montserrat Gomendio, and I am head of the OECD Centre for Skills. And what we do at this center is basically to try to understand what changes are taking place in the labor market, how that influences the demand for skills, and how can education systems become more responsive to changes in the labor market so that they can equip people with the right skills. So basically we look at what is the impact of using technology in the classrooms, and then more broadly, what is the impact of using online resources, particularly for adult learning. So the evidence that we have shows that in many countries a huge effort has been made to introduce technology into the classrooms, but contrary to our expectations, what we find is that introducing technology in the classroom by itself not only doesn't improve student outcomes, but it actually has a negative impact on student outcomes. When it works, and this is in just a few cases, just schools that get it right, regions or countries, but really exceptional cases, is when teachers are trained so that they know how to use technology to improve their teaching practices. If just devices are sent to the classroom and teachers are not trained on the proper use of technology, not technology itself, but how to improve teaching practices, then the outcome is negative. If we look at the use of online resources, particularly for adult learning, what we find is that people use a lot of the resources. There has been criticism about MOOCs, for example, because only a small proportion of people finish. Our evidence shows that doesn't seem to be a problem for the users. The users are not looking for a new certificate or degree. What they're looking for is for specific information that they need in order to upskill or reskill. So the fact that they don't finish the full course is not a problem. That's not what they're looking for. However, we do find that highly skilled people make a lot of use of these resources, but people with low levels of skills don't. So rather than helping bridge the gap between the highly skilled and the low skilled, it's creating a greater divide, and we need to find ways to motivate people with low skills in order to make full use of these resources. Europe is very diverse, and again, what we find is that there are differences in the degree of digital penetration, both in the classroom and in labor markets. So in some countries it has happened very quickly, for example, countries in Northern Europe, or countries that have developed a specific strategy, placing a lot of emphasis on digitalization. One example is Estonia. Estonia really decided some time ago that digital technology was going to be the focus of their economy, and they really have improved a lot in terms of upskilling their population and also generally, but also on digital skills, and the economy is really now around the digital economy, so it's a story of success. In other countries, the degree of penetration is still low, but in these countries, the challenge is huge because the level of skills of the population tends to be very low. So people really need to upskill and reskill before digitalization starts penetrating quickly, or otherwise the challenge will be very serious for them. At the international level, I think that what's important is that countries understand how they compare to other countries. So normally education has been seen as a national policy, but since we have the international comparative surveys, countries have realized that they may think that they're doing well compared to the past, for example, but when they compare themselves to other countries, they find that they're not doing as well as they thought. So this is known as the Pisa Shock. Pisa is our survey of 15-year-olds. So in most countries, that's the end of secondary compulsory education. So by doing this survey, we understand whether education systems during the compulsory phase really equip students with the right level of skills. Now, most countries have gone through the Pisa Shock, like Germany, for example. The main difference is how they react to that. So some countries like Germany went through the Pisa Shock, and then they really put a lot of emphasis on reforming the education system to improve student outcomes. Other countries don't seem to care that much about the fact that they're not doing well compared to other countries. But I think it's becoming more widespread that countries realize that it's important that their students perform well in comparison with students from other countries, because with globalization, students and talent is going to move around. So if the students of a particular country are not doing very well, they run the risk of being displaced by students coming from other countries with better educational systems. Now, national policies are still very important. It's normally national governments that set the standards for the whole country through evaluations, through the core curricula. And then as more and more countries become decentralized in their education systems, regions and local authorities play an increasingly important role, particularly in implementing the policies. So Spain has one major issue that has been a very worrying issue for a long time, which is early school leaving. So early school leaving in Spain has historically been very high, around 30%. But before the economic crisis in 2008, these people that had low levels of skills could go to some sectors like the construction sector and still get a job with a decent salary. After the crisis, people with such low levels of skills found it really difficult to find a job, so they needed to find ways to upskill and reskill. And through the last education reform, the LOMCE, there was a development of vocational education and training so that it was made more attractive for these people, so that students would choose vocational education and training rather than leaving the education system, and this proved very efficient. So now we have more students choosing vocational education and training, which actually has really high levels of employability, so it really has shown to be a good option for many students. Apart from that, if we look at Pisa, for example, Spain was doing around average, slightly below. In the last years it has improved and now it's around average. Now the question of whether being average is good enough or not, it's up to the country to decide. So countries like Singapore, many Asian countries, Estonia, Finland, even Portugal recently, which has improved a lot in terms of student performance, they don't think that being average is good enough because the top performers are doing so much better than the average. So they try to learn from the good practices implemented in these countries in order to be really competitive compared to the rest. Spain is one of those examples where a lot of effort has been made to send laptops or other devices to the classroom. Also, a lot of effort has been made to connect the schools, even schools in rural areas, but where the teachers still need the training and the support required in order to make the best use of technology and improve student outcomes. Otherwise, with the effort done in terms of introducing technology in the classroom, we wouldn't be having average outcomes. So it's about teacher training and it's about teacher professional development, and it's not about the digital divide. Some people think that some teachers are not very familiar with the technology. That's really not the problem. That's not the constraint. The issue is that they learn how to use the technology to develop more individualized teaching and to develop new teaching practices that are more innovative. Having worked at the OECD for many years, I am very aware of all the good examples from other countries on policies that have had a major positive impact. We are very aware that we can never take a policy from one context and apply it to another and hope that it'll have the same effect. So it's very context dependent, and we take that into account when we make our policy recommendations to governments. But there are many examples of good practices, and some countries are very eager to learn from the good examples of other countries to face whatever challenges they have. And I think it would be good if Spain made a greater effort in understanding what are those good practices and to what extent they are applicable to the Spanish context.